welcome to the first ever CFHA Shark Tank. Today, we will welcome 3 contestants, clinician innovators who will pitch their clinic-based research proposals to our science-y sharks with the hopes for bite-in. And who are these sharks? They are skilled researchers who are ready to invest mentorship, connections, and even money to support projects they decide are worthy. So if you're ready, let's meet the sharks.
excited to be here. This is one of my professional dreams, to be here on Shark Tank, and just to tell you about some exciting things that we're doing where I work. So I'm a behavioral health consultant. My name's Tina Stutz. I work in a family and community medicine clinic. We have actually 3 clinic sites, and we've been working on something so exciting that we think that no one could resist working with us and supporting our efforts. So let me just start telling you about it. We have concerns about children who are seen in our clinic who are having behavioral problems. So we have a lot of families coming in with children who are aggressive or oppositional, defiant. Sometimes the kids range from being angry to suddenly being sort of withdrawn and upset and sad. And these are happening even when children are as young as 3 years old. The problem that we see is that these kids are coming into our clinic, but out of every 10 kids, probably only 2 are getting the services that they need. And this is pretty consistent with what we've read. The 2013 CDC surveillance report on child behavioral and emotional issues said that prevalence of these problems has been on the rise for the past couple of decades. And access to services is a really large problem. So we thought in our setting we might be able to do something about this. So we do know, because we've read lots and lots of articles and have actually seen it play out in real families, what happens to kids who have behavior problems, especially when they start really early. And so there's all these terrible outcomes that we could be helping to prevent. So school failure and school dropout. These kids tend to use a lot and a ton of our healthcare provider time in our healthcare system. As adults, they have poor health-related quality of life. Sometimes they even slip into drug and alcohol use in adolescence and early adulthood, and they can even be involved with the juvenile justice system. So all of these negative outcomes are very, very expensive and costly, not only to the children and the families, but to our communities and to society as a whole. I think you would agree it's a horrible problem, right? Yeah. So our idea is that in our clinics where we provide primary care, we could be integrating some mental health or behavioral treatments into the clinic, because the kids and families already come here and they've been coming since they were infants, and we have providers who look like this person here who are smiley and kind and friendly and have good relationships with the families. And so our thought is that we could actually bring something in here to address this problem that we're seeing. So we got together. We have a lot of physicians and providers and nurses, and me, I'm an LCSW, and a couple other people, and we all got together, and we basically came up with a program that we're calling Children and Parents Together, CPT. CPT is going to be a parenting intervention. So we sat around and talked about all the problems that our families are experiencing, and then we talked about what types of skills or things that we thought we could teach the families that would really help them address this problem. So we came up with the top 5 skills, and they're listed right here. So we have active listening skills, catching your child being good, using praise and rewards, setting clear rules, and being consistent with consequences. So to us, these seemed like 5 very important parenting skills that if we could teach all of the parents in our clinics, we could probably cut down on the child behavior problems that we're seeing. But we need your help, because this is a really large endeavor. And we feel like we need some support and mentoring, possibly money, to help get this off the ground, because it's a very busy clinic and we have a lot of things going on, and we're not really sure that we can pull it off alone. So let me tell you what our plan is, and then you can let me know how excited you are to work with us. So we are lucky. We are located next to College University, which is an excellent academic institution. And at it, we have several training programs for master's level clinicians. So we have master's in psychology students, MFT students, and MSW students. And we have a tradition of having them come in and do internships and practicums in our setting. And so our plan is to train them up, and then in our 3 clinic settings, we will let them actually deliver the services. So we typically have 6 students every academic year over the course of 2 semesters, and we sort of did some math and figured out that we think that each student could probably see 64 families per semester. And across 3 sites and 2 semesters, that would be 768 families that we could reach in 1 academic year. So we think that this is an awesome plan. And because we would like to evaluate what we're doing, we also think that we need to measure some outcomes before and after we deliver the services. And you all are researchers, so this is why we're proposing this piece. We are going to have a baseline questionnaire, and then after they receive the services, they will complete a post-test questionnaire. And the questionnaire, we kind of sat down and came up with the things that we think that this intervention will help with the most. So there are several questions on it that ask about child behaviors, and then several that ask about specific parenting behaviors and how confident the parents are. And then at the end, we're going to ask about parent satisfaction. So the purpose here is that we see a lot of unhappiness and family stress, parent depression and unhappiness, and family conflict in a lot of the families that come into our clinics. And we would like to actually address this to make the world a better place for these children and for their families. So, sharks, who would like to take a bite of our study?
Dr. Stutz,
Yes.
I want to compliment you on your enthusiasm
Thank you. Thank you.
and your unusual creativity in this study.
Thank you. We are creative.
Not always a good thing. I have some concerns. You talked at the beginning of your presentation about having read a lot of the publications out there about the area you're working in.
Yes.
However, I didn't then hear you do anything with it. Basically, your literature review should be informing what it is that you're going to do into the future. You've heard the expression, researchers build on by standing on the shoulders of giants. You seem to miss the shoulders here. Ultimately, if we put garbage in, then garbage comes out, and we don't really want too much garbage here. Wow. Now, there are existing interventions. We know these interventions work. They have empirical support behind them. Other folks have done research on this, but you guys chose not to tie in the intervention you're using with work that has already been proven to work. In addition to that, the type of survey protocols you're using seem to be kind of wishy-washy. You just picked some questions you wanted to ask, and you didn't really think about psychometrics. Do you know what psychometrics are? All right, psychometrics. When we put together an instrument to do measurements, again, garbage in, garbage out, we have to be careful that what we're actually asking on the instrument is actually measuring what we think it's going to be measuring. That's called validity. So we need to have instruments that have a valid capacity to them. In addition to being valid, we also need the measure to be able to report the same kind of responses time and time again. Your design is pre and post. If it doesn't measure the same thing consistently, we call that reliability. So I'm concerned that the instrument that you're using, since you were creative in making it, is not necessarily particularly valid nor necessarily reliable. So that's kind of a big deal. And I'm not sure really where you can go with it without having that a little bit more strong. So I have some recommendations for you. I think that if you want this to move forward someday,
soon,
you might want to recruit some additional members for your research team. You're working next to a university that you said is a very good university, so perhaps you want to recruit a collaborator who's a methodologist, who can help you put together your study.
Okay.
Perhaps you want to recruit a colleague from the university who can collaborate with you to do your statistics. I didn't hear you talk about a power analysis. Do you know what a power analysis is? It has nothing to do with power bars.
No.
So this is kind of why I think you need to be thoughtful about the team that you want to put together.
Okay.
So given these concerns, and I want to be supportive because it seems like you're an up-and-coming new researcher, I'm a little concerned that this one might fall flat on its face.
Wow. Thank you.
You're welcome.
The feedback. So I would like to say to the other sharks, well, thank you to Dr. Vospick, but I feel like we're a very new and enthusiastic team with a lot of creativity, and I think that we are willing to take any kind of leadership that you would offer us. And so if you have specific suggestions or things you would want us to do, we would definitely do them.
So I want to echo a couple of things that have been said and add one other. I love your passion. I think the parenting advice that you have.
Kumbaya, not passion.
Oh, kumbaya. The passion for parenting is wonderful. The 5 pieces of advice are great. Good projects start with the kind of enthusiasm that you have, but without a team with the kind of diversity that you've just heard about, it's going to likely fall flat. However, we have one really wonderful, important resource for you, the June issue of Family Systems and Health.
Always.
The June issue
Seen it.
has a wealth of resources, examples of actual articles, commentary about how the authors made it work, and reading these kinds of things, actually, you learn on the spot. It's really good. And I have one for you.
Oh, thank you.
However,
I really-
I'm out.
I'm so disappointed.
As you know, I'm passionate about families, children's, and access to care.
And I think you would be the perfect partner to work with us on this.
I've funded projects such as parent-child interaction therapy, which is evidence-based, ages 2 to 7. But what I didn't hear is your evidence for this project. I also didn't hear your implementation plan and how you're really going to move this through your clinics. These types of projects can create chaos as well. You have to be solid in your planning. I would recommend that you also develop a team at your clinics to really work on a quality improvement project about implementation prior to doing any of this as well. Look, I know when a project is a 0 or a hero. I'd like you to further develop it, look at the research, look at the evidence, and return. Even with a budget, you asked for something like mentorship and money, but you didn't actually directly give us what you need for this project. I don't see anything tangible that we can jump on. So at this point, you're 0, and I'm out.
Okay. So I feel like not everybody's out, right?
It's clear how much you care about parents and children, and I really, really appreciate the compassion that you have.
Thank you. Thank you.
However, as you said, this is a really large endeavor, and there's a real opportunity cost. If you're implementing this, it means you're not offering something else. So you need to be really sure that this is the best possible intervention that you can offer in your clinics to these parents and families, that you're not robbing them of some other clinical opportunity. And in light of that, I think you still have, I agree with my fellow Sharks, you still have a lot of work to do.
Thank you. Thanks for the feedback.
Dr. Stutes, I'm wondering if you have considered a control condition. So some kids within your clinic that would actually not receive the intervention right away, or maybe would actually just receive something different.
So a control condition. So we have thought about that, but I think that we feel like it's really important that every parent and family in need receives the intervention.
So how do you propose to test whether or not it actually is better than usual care, for example, that doesn't involve the opportunity cost as well as the potential disruption to your clinic?
So I think that we could use guidance in that area if you were interested in working with us.
You certainly could use guidance. I'm not sure what I can offer. I'm still trying to wrap my head around if there's something I could even glom onto here.
I would like to say that if any of you are willing to take part in this project, we would be willing to change pretty much any aspect of it because clearly we haven't thought it through. New measures, new design, different intervention plan.
Well, Dr. Stutes, you said there's a university close to you. Maybe there's a few classes you can take.
Maybe.
Maybe you could even get into one of the classes, audit, do a little bit of a literature review that would show one of the instructors that you're thinking about it and you're aware of the kinds of prior work that's been done. That would help you know what your next step is
Yeah.
that makes
okay.
sense given as a contribution to the literature.
Yes.
And
These are good suggestions. Still waiting to see if anyone is willing to be in.
I'm afraid I can't be here for you this time. I'd like to see it come back in a couple years.
Years. Okay.
Okay, Sharks, let's recap. Mark, you're out because you don't feel Dr. Stutes had a well-designed study amongst other concerns. Larry, you fired Dr. Stutes because she didn't read your journal. Is anyone going to give Dr. Stutes an offer?
I'm afraid I'm also out. I think you've got a lot of work to do. Still need to talk with some parents and families as well about their perceived needs. Maybe consider some qualitative exploratory work as part of that early phase. But for now, I can't help you, sorry.
Okay, thank you.
I feel like I have some things I could potentially contribute in terms of developing a more rigorous research design, helping you decide on some measures that do have the validity and reliability that would be necessary. I'm just having a hard time finding the actual foundation to hang my hat on right now to even be able to start. And I think you have a lot of the pieces there, but I want to echo my colleagues and say that there's too much work left to be done here, and we'd love to see it kind of come back with a little bit more meat that we could potentially sink our teeth into.
Okay, thank you for the feedback.
So, I'm out too.
Okay.
0.
Well, there it is. Thank you, Dr. Stutes, for being on our show.
He's here. Maybe she'll actually.
Well, I'm so happy to be here today with you. I work as an administrative lead for behavioral health services at Rochester University. Our university oversees primary care clinics at about 20 primary care clinics across our country, not country, county. And right now, all of the behavioral health services occur in outpatient specialty mental health clinics. When I took the job, one of the things I did was lead with the idea that we need to integrate our primary care clinics to increase access to behavioral health services for our patients. As a result, we were able to receive state funds to integrate 10 of our clinics as part of a clinical demonstration project. We chose to implement the primary care behavioral health model because when we looked in the literature, we saw that there was a link between this model of service delivery and access to behavioral health services, and that was our main goal. However, I really wanted to implement an evaluation study because not only do I want to understand, I really want to understand how PCBH is impacting and improving system and patient outcomes. And I didn't really see that in the literature. And in addition, I think that it's really important before I decide to expand it to all the clinics in our region. However, the state funds, of course, don't actually support any evaluation. So we went to our local university and collaborated with our Department of Community Health, who agreed to partner with us to help us with the electronic medical record data as they had experience pulling that data and looking at it and analyzing it. However, what I was hoping from you all today is that perhaps this evaluation would be of interest to some of you, and that your expertise in research methodology as well as integrated healthcare may be able to make the evaluation even better. In addition, we could use some funds to help make the evaluation actually be implemented. Let me tell you what we propose. We propose 3 sets of primary care clinics within our region being identified to be a part of the evaluation project. They would be matched on the average number of primary care providers, average number of primary care patients, as well as socioeconomic status. Then we would randomly select one in each set to receive the behavioral health consultant as part of the primary care behavioral health model service delivery, and the other clinic would stay as usual care. Those clinics receiving the behavioral health consultant, the state funds will hire fund those positions and conduct a 1-week training of those consultants to ensure that they understand what they need to do using an expert in primary care behavioral health. Then orientation meetings will occur at the primary care clinics to let them know about this new model of service delivery and develop some clinical pathways. Luckily, at all of these clinics, the primary care, before a primary care appointment, all the patients complete evaluation measures, including the PHQ-9 for screening purposes. So what we were proposing is that we would add 27 items to the questionnaires, and that would consist of what the behavioral health measure, 20, that seems to be very prevalent in the integrated healthcare literature to assess psychological well-being, symptomatology, and functioning. We would add to that the 7-item brief psychosocial inventory, functioning inventory, to really complement the functioning side of things, since that's supposed to be the target of primary care behavioral health. At the 8th week after the primary care appointment, mailed surveys would be sent to each patient to repeat those same questionnaires to be better able to assess whether there's been any changes. And we'd also include the patient experience questionnaire 15, where we would modify it to be direct towards the primary care behavioral health model. We would assess feasibility and appropriateness via interviews with our primary care staff to really understand how this primary care behavioral health model fit with our local clinic, as well as how feasible it was to actually implement. We would assess adoption by looking at patients who screened positive on the PHQ-9, above a 9, and look at, who were they referred to? Were they referred to the behavioral health consultant? Were they referred to our specialty mental health services? Did they receive an antidepressant, or did they get nothing at all? All of that data coming from our electronic medical record. We would look at patient functioning using the PHQ-9 item number 10, BHM 20, total score as well as their subscores, and the psychosocial functioning. We decided that this evaluation really could take up to a year, but we really want to make sure that if this does improve our patient care, that we move and we integrate all of our clinics if this really is improving access to behavioral health, as well as improving the care we deliver. So what I'm hoping is that one of you might find this to be as valuable as we find, and that you will be willing to support us in this project.
When I listen to you, my first thought is that you're not in the 0 range, but you're not a hero yet either. Okay. I think we have a lot to work with here. Mm-hmm. You named the first thing out the gate, which is the PCBH model. I'm with you on that. Okay. We'll have to check in on these folks soon.
Okay.
But as I heard you, there's a few things that I appreciated about what you said, and then I have a few questions as well. The first thing I appreciate is that you have a history of a clinical demonstration project. That's great. Sounds like you've already done some impact, some review process. You've been really thinking through things. You did a great review of the literature. I really appreciate that. You've got solid knowledge and foundation, but there needs to be a little bit more. I heard you say that you want to study the impact of PCBH, but then I also heard you say that there's a 1-week training, is that right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you believe that your clinicians will be qualified and fully trained in 1 week?
I guess I thought so, yeah.
No.
Okay.
Next, you want to think about the PCBH model, and you want to look at it, and it sounds like you also want to measure its fidelity. Make sure that what you're doing is PCBH and that you're doing it right. Mm-hmm. So you're lacking training, but how are you going to measure the fidelity of the model?
Well, I hadn't really thought of that. I thought the training would be enough, but I did go to a couple sessions over the last couple days where I learned about how you could maybe use the electronic medical record, and I think I heard about a measure. It's called like maybe the 3CAT. No, it was like the PPAQ or something.
The PPAQ?
Yeah, which I don't know much about it, but maybe it's like a self-report measure that providers could use.
Well, it sounds like you need to do your homework.
Okay.
Okay. I do think you need a fidelity measure. You need to look at what's going to be feasible for your clinic, and you need to look at more solid training. Mm-hmm. You talked about wanting to roll this out to all of your clinics. Have you thought through what an implementation plan would look like?
The implementation plan was to do the training and then place these behavioral health consultants in the practices, and that would be our implementation plan.
What about your SWOT?
Mm-hmm.
What type of barriers, strengths are you looking at?
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I think that these would be great ways for you if you were willing to help us, because I think that...
Have you done any stakeholder meetings?
Have we, stakeholder meetings? Well, we were going to do those orientation meetings with the primary care providers.
Do you have any history of evaluation study before?
No.
What about a budget?
So we have, the Department of Community Health has offered their services for free, but we really, and the evaluations normally happen at the beginning of the primary care visit. So right now, all we have to do is pay for the mailed surveys, which our university said that they would help with that piece. But I suspect that we'll need additional support. Another reason why I wanted to come here, because we need additional support to make sure it can.
And your plan for sustainability for this project? You're going to implement something. If you see a success, how are you going to maintain it at these agencies?
I guess I haven't thought through all of those aspects.
That's really important as well.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be looking at sustainability and build a plan prior to really implementing anything and prior to coming back up here.
Okay.
I liked your use of a comparison group with usual care. I did like that. However, as you know, with the literature, PCBH needs more rigorous research methodologies.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Would you consider an RCT?
Well, in some ways, it is difficult to imagine that, because in our clinics, I wanted to match them because they're very vastly different. Some of them are really small primary care practices in rural settings, and some of them are a little larger in urban settings. And so that's why why we proposed to really match the clinics on size, because in my mind, that seemed like that would be a big issue. But I don't know, I'm not really quite sure. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
That's actually one of the parts I liked about your study design, was that you have a small number of clinics, and matching actually helps improve your power, but 6 that are put into 3 clusters, mm-hmm. I don't have to do the math on that one to know there's not enough power.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
Okay.
Well, the fact that you're looking to do some kind of comparison with the PCBH model sort of makes me salivate.
Now it does?
So can I say, however, one thing I want to tell you about is there's a guy who's walking around out here in a captain's uniform, and he has a brilliant team that worked with him. And they wrote a recent review saying how important it is to do this kind of stuff. They have a lot of ideas. And in addition to that...
Was it in the journal?
No, it's in the Journal of Clinical Psychology and Medical Settings. His name is Hunter, Dr. Hunter. Captain, Captain. And it's in that other journal. But there is this journal. This journal in the June issue.
Journal all the time.
In the June issue, there is a collection of examples that would help you really understand and sort of solidify a lot of the design. So, for example, one of the things that I'm wondering about. Oh, and here's a copy for you, by the way.
Thank you. I think I've seen it before, but I'll definitely go through it more thoroughly.
I'm curious. I'm a little bit. You want to be careful and not do too much. And I mean, do you need to have all these instruments? Do they really, is there enough separateness between them to justify making all your patients go through all this work?
Well, I mean, I thought it was valuable because there was really, I didn't really think all of our patients have depression, and so the PHQ-9 didn't seem the best match for really looking at patient outcomes.
Maybe you
But,
don't need it.
I mean, I can see what you're talking about. It is 27 more questions to ask of our patients.
I agree with Larry. I'm concerned about the measurement burden here. I think it's great that you're interested in patient-oriented outcomes like functioning, and that's a real strength of your project. But I'd be concerned about what was 27 plus 7 plus another 15. That's a lot to put your patients through as part of this evaluation, and I think you need to think through whether there are some brief or less burdensome measures that can capture what you're interested in.
Okay.
The other thing is, you talked a lot about testing a model, but it's not clear to me that you're thinking quite as much about what is actually kind of most important to the patients involved in the study. And I really think that you need to kind of hone in on getting beyond testing a model to actually thinking about what matters to patients about this intervention.
I've read an article about that recently. It's a good idea. There's some people that did some research about that in Canada.
That's right. And hey, haven't you recently implemented some kind of patient advisory board for your research?
Yeah,
your
we
institution?
did. We did. And I had never really thought of really going to them for this, but now that you've been talking, it does make sense that maybe we could use our patient engagement board, which we primarily use it for other reasons, but maybe we could go to them and ask them what they think of the idea.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Dr. Funderburk, it is doctor. I
Clinical
was a bit
psychologist.
confused. I think that you did some of your homework and you have an interest in what you're doing. But one of the things you didn't share with us, and remember, I'm a chair of a study panel at NIH, one of the things you didn't tell us about was your team and who it is that you are. What are the skills that you bring to this? Are you competent? You talked to us about being an administrator. That's the first things that came out of your mouth, and now you're trying to sell us something that's research-based. So one of the things I'd recommend is trying to identify for anybody who's going to evaluate your work, how have you been trained? What have you done similarly to this in the past that demonstrates you are capable of doing this kind of work? Who are your team members? Who are your research team members? What skills do they bring to the project? How have they been trained? What experiences have they had? Have you published on this already? All the typical kinds of things that an academic or a professional researcher has to sort of solidify what it is that you're bringing to the overall project. At the moment, when I heard some of my colleagues asking you questions, a number of times I heard you say, oh, I didn't think about that. Oh, I don't know that. And that's starting to make me worry a little bit about what you're personally bringing to the table and what your team is bringing to the table. My second comment revolves around your overall methodological conceptualization of your project. You said at the very beginning that there's not much research on what you want to look at, right? And that's a good thing, filling the gap in the literature, right? That's what we're supposed to do as researchers. But usually when we come across a new phenomena that we want to study, we don't jump right in and do this humongous quantitative study like you're talking to us about. Usually what we want to do is maybe a small pilot study to see if it's feasible. Can we do this? Is what we're doing acceptable to the population that we're looking at? Sometimes, even if it's very, very new, before we do any kind of pilot study or a preliminary work, we want to maybe go into doing some qualitative research instead of jumping immediately into quantitative research to see what some of the areas are that might be driving the issues and the problems that you've identified. So what I'd recommend if I were you is to go back a little bit, slow down, create a small pilot study within your county, since you have lots of opportunities to reach out, and collect some preliminary data which would then support what you're trying to do down here, or not support it, and then you don't want to invest all that time, resources, and energy in something that wasn't quite thought out sufficiently. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a smart idea, and I like the idea that it would help us not waste the resources if we didn't if we don't find that the surveys, for instance, work or something like that.
Or if there's the response burden, where you ask too many questions and by the end they're all circling 5. That's not
Right.
very helpful.
Right. Okay. I mean, I do think that I am a clinician and clearly am in charge of this entire service line within our organization, and I do have that background. I don't practice it as often now because this is my role, but I can get your point that I didn't really lead with that, so I clearly can incorporate that in the future. And I like the idea of maybe thinking about ways we have a certain timeline because this decision, we have the state funds, and so we only have a certain period of time to implement. But perhaps there's a way to test out some of the parts of it to make it be implementable and more feasible.
So sharks, you've shared a lot of concerns, you've asked a lot of questions. Let's summarize and let Dr. Funderburk know who's in and who's out.
Up front, I want to be in. Larry, I want to team up with you.
Good
I'd be-
idea.
Bold move.
I'd be willing to match those funds, working on it as a pilot project, take our team, help you with fidelity, help you with the training by utilizing national experts, build up that case, build up your strength, and I'd like to work with Larry on this, if you're willing to do it.
I am. I think this is a small project, but right now we really don't know, and I'll depart from Mark on that comment. I think we know enough qualitatively. There's a lot of good evidence that there's a lot of uptake and attractiveness about the PCBH model. Lots of folks like it. What we don't really know is if it's better than usual care. And while I think an RCT is strong, this is a very good place to start. And I'd be willing to throw my hat in if this is successful, if you'd be willing to make sure that you move forward with publishing this and recruiting other systems to do something similar. So in fact, we have a much larger database to really look at, does the PCBH model make a difference compared to what happens without it?
Mm-hmm. I'd be willing to do that.
All right, that sounds good to me.
And maybe perhaps we could publish in a journal that you know of?
We'll look.
Well, if my fellow sharks will have me, I think I've got something I can offer you as well. My research team has a database that looks at all the different ways in which integrated care interventions have been evaluated. Mm-hmm. And we could work through that together to look for some patient-oriented measures that make sense for your project and that will be acceptable, not too burdensome for your participants to complete. So I'm in.
Thank you. Awesome.
At the risk of too many cooks in the kitchen, I think I'm going to step away from this one. But I would want to give a little piece of advice, not that I would ever give you advice. But potentially, as you're moving forward away from a clinical demonstration project and more into a research and evaluation, is making sure that your clinics are actually capable of collecting and managing the data that's necessary for this. It sounded like in your previous project there wasn't anything there, and a lot of clinics don't have that infrastructure or need just a little bit of assistance from other folks to make sure that can happen. So I want to make sure your project is successful and that just the data burden on their part isn't something that sinks in.
Thank you.
Dr. Funderburk, I'm on the fence. I think that you've got something happening here, but I think probably what I have to offer is maybe something we can chat about off camera.
Okay.
But I'm not in at the moment.
Okay.
Thank you, Sharks. Audience, let's hear it for Dr. Funderburk for coming here today and sharing her amazing new project.
complex patients, the ones we call superutilizers or just sometimes heart sink. These are the patients that make these charts infamous, the 5% that account for over 50% of healthcare spending. Our payers are wielding their sticks, and primary care practices are scrambling to try to find an intervention to improve health, but also to decrease the cost of spendy things like emergency department visits and hospital visits. Yet, an evidence-based solution, a good one, is not yet found in the literature. A recent report, however, does provide us with a few key guidelines, including stratify patients by risk using functional impairment and social health needs, consider an intervention that has multi-components and is comprehensive, and deploy a team. The aim of my study is to evaluate the impact of an intervention that's based on these guidelines, looking at patient health outcomes, but also looking at the impact of the intervention on the healthcare system itself, otherwise known as implementation outcomes. The study takes place in 3 family medicine residency training clinics in Northeast Tennessee, each of which employs 6 physicians, 18 residents, and a staff of nursing, psychology, social work, and pharmacy. We plan to stratify patients by risk using 3 gates. First, we'll use payer data to look at an index that classifies the highest risk patients based on how sick they are and how much they cost. Second, we will have that group of patients vetted by our clinic providers who will give us some input about which patients they think would benefit the most from team-based care. And then we'll bring those patients in for an interview in which we'll really ask them good questions about their social health risk, their functioning in a day-to-day way, and their interest in being part of team-based care. This is a 3-year study, and we plan to recruit about 20 patients from each site during the first year. It'll take us 6 months to deploy the intervention, and we'll have some time for following up over time. We'll use the same risk procedure at all 3 sites, but our team-based intervention will likely differ slightly between sites because we will use a quality improvement mechanism at each site to develop the team care intervention. This is a quality improvement mechanism that we all refer to as champion teams. Champion teams are groups of key stakeholders at each clinic who deploy kind of a very active, engaged meeting format, data-driven decision-making, to sort of vet and then pilot and eventually scale out a team-based intervention that they feel like will work for their environment, that makes sense for their clinic. We just sort of structure our champion team activities around a framework from implementation science called EPIS, and it gives us a good sense of how to phase in different implementation activities. And we've designed this project so that we can sort of practice a little bit, and if we don't have it right, we can fail in a way that's safe initially. So we'll fade in payer panels one at a time over the course of the first year. So we'll start with our CAHABA ACO and kind of play around with our team-based intervention, use our champion team to sort of look at the initial outcomes, and then gradually add more as we go. This is a pre-post study, pre-post intervention design. So what we'll do is we'll look before and after the team-based intervention, about 6-month intervention, at these variables for patient health outcomes, medical use, and also their actual self-reported health on these measures. But again, we'll also be looking at the implementation aspects to this. So an important thing will be, what was our reach of the intervention to all the complex patients in our clinics? That's penetration. Or how did providers and patients find the care? Was it acceptable to them, the way it was delivered? Were we able to actually do our team care approach with a high level of fidelity to the model that we designed? And what did it cost to actually implement this? Could we sustain it over time? This study is designed to be kind of like an NIH R34 mechanism, which is an exploratory study. And it allows us to have some variability in the way the different clinics implement team-based care, collect a bunch of really good, rich data, and then if we see differences in how team care plays out and the outcomes we get at the different sites, we have the data to go back and kind of see if we can sort out what was going on. And then that gives us some good food for thought as we go into our next study. So sharks. I am a clinician. I spend a lot of time in these sites. I have grassroots buy-in on doing this project in these sites. But I don't have the connections I need necessarily to pull it all off. I'm hoping I can get some buy-in from all of you today. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this project, so I want to jump in and give a little bit of feedback right now. I really want to commend you on how sophisticated this is already without it even having our feedback yet. Clearly, you got some good experience with research. I was surprised to hear about the R34, but that really does help put it into context, knowing that some of this is a bit of an exploratory, preparatory work for a larger study. So I guess, I can tell that you can talk the talk a little bit here, which is nice to see. But I do also still see some areas for potential improvement. One place that we're looking at here is the trial design. And of course, it is a small n, and it's intentionally so with an R34 type mechanism. But I'm wondering, have you considered a newer kind of trial approach where we combine and simultaneously examine patient outcomes as well as the effective implementation?
I haven't. I mean, I sort of proposed both. I didn't know there was like a formal
There is.
design.
It's called a hybrid trial design.
Hybrid trial design.
And it seems like your aims really match up well with the aims of that type of a trial design. So I think couching it in those terms probably is really going to help you and put it right in the kind of new context of the implementation literature. The other thing I want to point out too that I really like about this project, but still could use a little bit of tweaking, is this whole idea of rolling out the clinic or rolling out 3 clinics at the same time,
Sure.
but then rolling in these different payer groups. And I'm still kind of wrapping my head around that a little bit,
Sure.
but I like that idea from the outset.
It was just a very pragmatic decision for us.
Certainly, and I think that that clearly is an important piece when working with community clinics. I'm still kind of rolling in my head about how to make that a more sophisticated and rigorous design, but I think you're really onto something here.
Thank you. It's wonderful feedback.
Yeah.
Hybrid trial design. I like the sound of that.
Well, I think you've put a lot of thought into this, and this is on an extremely important topic. Anybody that spends any time in primary care knows how important it is to deal with patient complexity and the team approach. I agree with the comments. I'm actually reminded of something that would be a good resource for you to make sure the attention to implementation science
Right.
that you're giving. In our special issue in
That
June,
issue.
in our special issue in June,
He's only up
there
one
are
to give
some
away.
people who wrote an article just on implementation
Brilliant.
science that was superb. I can't remember their names.
There must be brilliant people.
But there are so many examples in that special issue that you could learn from that would give you some other ideas. And so I have a copy
Awesome.
for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is fantastic. I'd heard about this.
Yeah, of course you've heard about it. So, but the R34, you've heard us talk, I don't know if you're off stage, you heard us talk about comparison, and so I'm wondering, even with this, is there, for an R34 mechanism, do they expect you to have comparison data?
I don't think so. My expectation is that a good description of the process, and we are doing pre-post, so we'll have some kind of quasi.
I mean with a separate,
Yeah.
pre-post is, you don't know what.
Sure. Not as strong.
Well, this is one place where I think consultation from a methodologist could actually be very helpful. If you remember back to your grid where you showed the different time points where you would roll in your payers, your phases, you could actually pretty easily turn that into what's called a dynamic rollout design. I know, it's a sexy term.
Dynamic rollout.
Try to stay calm.
Oh my God.
But where essentially what you have is if you examine the payers before you roll them into the active intervention, all those patients prior serve as your control condition. So what you have is you have a control group that starts, and then you have your intervention start at random time points across your payer groups. So you can actually do a within-site comparison and then also compare across
That
payers.
would not be that hard to do.
No, it's a fairly powerful design, even with a smaller sample like you're proposing.
Can you say the name of it again?
Dynamic rollout design.
Thank you.
Say it slower.
Dynamic rollout.
That is kind of sexy. Yeah.
Sounds good. Rolls off the tongue nicely.
Now, I have to say, I'm hungry for this. I appreciate the health system focus, your clear outline of steps, your implementation framework, your champion quality and improvement design. I love all of that. And I love the real focus on the system, how it's going to be impacted, and the potential to work with costs and sustainability. I'd like to add this piece with this design. Gotta go sexy. With this design, I want you to add return on investment, cost-saving metrics.
Perfect.
We can work on that team together. We can help you to build those calculations. We can work with those payers. With my connections, that's going to be a success. With Arizona State University, we focus on solid applied research. We want that health system focus and the impact there. We want to look at return on investment. We want these types of projects to build and bring to us now. I'm not interested in working with any of them on this.
Wow. Dr. Manson, I mean, you have huge, great resources, especially in that really pragmatic business model side. So
I think she still needs some work with design, though, don't you think?
Look, we'll bring it and we'll help you to deliver this. It will be a success, but you've got to pick me now. Or I'm out.
Well, I'd like to hear like what other people.
I have to say, even though cost cutting and return on investment is one element of this, I'd hate to see you sacrifice a real strength of your project, which is looking at outcomes that matter to patients. I love this project. I love that in your gates, you've looked at patient interest and engagement in the study, that you're looking at functioning and social determinants, that you're evaluating the patient experience, you're looking at patient-oriented outcomes, not just cost cutting, and I'd hate to see you kind of make that primary to the expense of the other aspects of the study. One thing that I think might just take this to like really the next level, I wonder if you've considered engaging patients as co-researchers and including them in your champions team, right?
I had
Because
not thought of
you
that.
want them to be central members of their own care teams and involved in co-producing their outcomes.
Right.
And so could you think about, now it's not easy to do, but it is incredibly meaningful to do, and I think you should think about whether you have the capacity to introduce that
Sure,
kind of
and
element. It would
you
really
and your
take this
group
to the-
really do a lot of patient-engaged work, and so it would be great to collaborate with you on how to build the patient piece in.
Yeah, absolutely. We could hook you up with the people who could train your entire team, because it really takes training not only for the patient co-researchers, but for all members of the team.
Absolutely, that takes a
I'd be
special
happy
skill.
to make that connection.
Sure. Dr. Manson, that's a really Dr. Sunderji's really got something compelling there.
In or out? Because no offense, I don't need you.
Okay.
I'm still in.
Good.
All right, guys, calm down. Dr. Palaha, I want to just compliment you on the professional presentation you made today. You hit some points that I haven't heard any of the other applicants today talk about. A primary one that was important for me, you called your framework, EPIS, I think you called it. For me, what you're talking about is you have grounded your proposed research in a theoretical foundation. You're not just pulling something out of your sky to do some research on and understand what's happening. So you are building on previous work that's been done, and the theory is informing what you're doing. That tells me that there's some solidity behind your research skills. I'm really impressed by that. In addition to that, you provided us with a very nice time frame, a timeline of when things would be deliverable, when things would be done. You have thought this through from the beginning to the end. That means that you haven't been excited about it and hoped we would fill in the blanks. You did a lot of your work. I really, really kind of like that. You also spend a considerable amount of time talking to us about your methodological design. You used a lot of the things that I think are important for us to be able to evaluate what you're going to do is going to be able to be done. So I think that the structure of your presentation, by talking about sustainability, feasibility, acceptability, you have touched on pretty much all of the components I would need to be able to evaluate your application in terms of an R34 mechanism.
Oh, great.
So good job.
Great, thank you. And you have so much experience in that area. Would you be willing to maybe partner with me, and once I get to the point of preparing an application, could you maybe give
Well,
me...
I think as a chair of an NIH study panel, what I'd be willing to offer for you is once you get it into good shape in a final draft, you can send it over to me and let me give you some critiques so that it will be strong enough by the time it gets to an actual panel to just sail right through.
Wow, that would be incredibly helpful. Dr. Manson, that would be very helpful if I could tap that resource, Dr. Manson.
Sharks, let's bring this to a close. In or out?
In or out?
I think you should choose us.
Yeah.
So,
You know, it's rare that as a journal editor I would offer, but in this case, if it would help, I'd be happy to write a letter to the other clinics endorsing your project, letting them know we want to support it, that we're interested in disseminating the stuff that you write about. I'm in.
great.
So I'm in, but on one condition. I would really like to see this work featured at the Canadian Integrated Mental Health Care Conference, June 1st and 2nd in Toronto. So if you can commit to that, I'm in.
Excellent. Awesome. And you'd be willing to review. So
You got me.
I can tap a lot of different resources here. And Dr. Manson, I have so much respect for your insider knowledge of kind of the corporate side and the cost side. And I'd really like to be able to I could have this whole team.
In or out?
Pick us.
I'm sorry, Dr. Manson, I'm going to have to pick them.
All right. So clearly, Dr. Palaha's project got a lot of sharks to take the bait. Let's give her a round of applause. Thank you, Sharks, for joining us. Coming up next, I'm just going to take a few closing minutes to follow up with the contestants. Contestants, please come back to the stage. So thank you to you three for coming here to the show and answer a few follow-up questions. I know our studio audience will want to hear how you think things will go. Tina, the Sharks had quite a feeding frenzy with your project. What was that like? Do you want to give up?
Well, what I've learned from this experience is that research and evaluation can be challenging, and there are some fairly high expectations for the quality of projects that we propose. And this is my passion and my life's work, and I really believe that working together with my team that we can take the advice that we've received from the sharks today and develop our ideas and our proposals. We're definitely going to read all of the literature in our area. I have to say that we do realize that there are evidence-based parenting interventions that are already in existence, although some people perhaps thought we did not know that. But our concern was that we didn't think they would fit with our population in our clinic. And so I think that what we've learned here is that we need to have a better base for what we select as our intervention. And I've learned a lot about measures. There were some terms that I had not heard before. We're going to work on how we'll measure our outcomes. I think we might do some initial qualitative exploratory research to figure out how best to make this work in our clinic setting. So I'll never give up. I'll never give up.
Okay.
Never give up.
Jen, the Sharks really liked how you had a comparison group and integrated the current PCBH literature. But there was that one significant concern about how you would measure adherence to the model or fidelity. What do you think you're going to do?
Well, I feel so amazingly happy that the Sharks recognized our effort that we put involved in looking into the literature and even like trying to figure out how to have this comparative data that everyone always talks about. The fidelity thing was new. I really thought that 1 week of training, but I get it now. I think Dr. Manson really helped me understand the value of kind of thinking through and making sure that what we implement in our clinics is really PCBH and really thinking about sustainability and I'm not positive I know how to go about all that, and I'm really glad that some Sharks were willing to join us and partner with us to help us with that. But I really, I just think it's gonna add to the evaluation and make it stronger and make me feel more confident as an administrator that if we choose to expand this beyond and spend money on it, that it's going to yield good outcomes, that it's actually going to touch our patients. And I did enjoy the comments about the patient and kind of thinking about, we had never used our patient engagement board that way before, but I think I'm gonna ponder upon that and really trying to think about how we can do that to improve it even better. So I'm just really very happy.
Great. And Jody, there was some real interest in your project by all the Sharks. It was a real feeding frenzy. We don't see that every day on the show. But Dr. Smith wanted you to think about some new designs that would improve and increase the rigor of your project. You want to comment?
Sure. You know, it's just been exciting to see how implementation science has developed new models and new methods that actually match very well the sort of pragmatic or just sort of common sense sorts of designs that clinicians that are innovators in primary care might come up with anyway. They're quite easy to adapt to these new models, and of course I just get heart palpitations when I hear words like hybrid trial design, and I've never heard that before, but I can't wait to go out and Google it and find out more about it. So I'm very excited, and I've got some great collaborators now.
Great. Well, folks, that's all our time for today. Thanks for coming to the first ever CFHA Shark Tank.